The Russians and the EU this morning are reacting to President Donald Trump's scam of the century that he calls the peace deal of the century, trying to make it the greatest peace deal of all. And every single time, as I pointed out in one of my last videos, every time the United States have tried to pressure Israel into a peace deal between Israel and the Fakestinians, because what has happened is tragedy has struck the United States, as if the forces of nature were against any peace plan between Israel and the Fakestinians. So I want to first go to, well, first of all, I need to get my screen share going here. Then I want to go to Ynet News. Posted this morning, EU, Russia to Trump. Two-state solution, only viable Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. Okay? So I talked about Trump's so-called peace plan and how there was so much double talk in it. How he claims he took Jerusalem off the table, yet at the same time demands that the Christians be able to carry their cross, their idols, and their graven images around East Jerusalem, which is a blasphemy, and for the Muslims to continue to have their Al-Aqsa Mosque at or near the holy place, which is only for the Jews. Trump's peace plan, though it claims to be beneficial to Israel, is actually more, how would I put it, insulting than Balaam. Because Balaam, although his way was perverse before Jehovah, as the angel pointed out when he almost killed him, in the book of Numbers, Balaam told the truth. He told Balak, the king of Moab, I cannot say anything more, anything less than what Jehovah told me to say. And he told the truth, and he told the whole truth. But this Trump peace plan, this scam of the century, is full of double talk. So now, even the Russians and the EU notices it. So what did they do? Exactly as the title says, EU and Russia to Trump, two-state solution, the only viable Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. So I will begin. Warning comes as Haley hints at Trump's deal of the century peace plan. Long takes advantage of new technology and has a lot both sides will like and things that they won't like. The European Union and Russia have warned U.S. President Donald Trump that any Israeli peace plan not based in the pre-1967 borders and a two-state solution will not succeed. In other words, what they're really saying is they will go to war if necessary to make sure that Israel goes back to its 60s. In other words, Israel has to be driven out of Jerusalem again. Israel has to be driven out of the Holy Land again. This is what they're saying. This is what happens when you don't take a firm stand. You don't negotiate with terrorists. And not only must you say you don't negotiate with terrorists, which the United States claim that they don't negotiate with terrorists, but you don't try to force others to negotiate with terrorists either. This is exactly what the United States have been trying to force, trying to force Israel to do all these years, to force Israel to negotiate with terrorists. And they wonder why all these horrible events of nature has happened in the United States, costing thousands of lives and untold billions of dollars, one of the latest of which was Hurricane Katrina. On the EU side, ambassadors from 8 member states issued the warning in a joint statement at the UN headquarters in New York. We, the European Union members of the UN Security Council, would like to reiterate once more and emphasize the EU's strong continued commitment to the internationally agreed parameters for just and lasting peace. Here we go again, using that word peace, in the Middle East, based on international law, relevant UN resolutions, and previous agreements, the statement said. The EU is truly convinced that the achievement of a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders with Jerusalem as its capital, as the capital of both states, never in history has one city been a capital of 2 states yet, and Europe would never agree to such a thing. Yet, Europe is trying to force Israel to do so. With their enemy, Israel's enemy. That meets Israeli and Palestinian security needs and Palestinian aspiration for statehood and sovereignty, ends with the occupation, and resolves all final status issues, is the only viable, realistic way to end the conflict and achieve just and lasting peace, the statement said. So in other words, what the EU is saying, this is coming from the EU side, what the EU is saying is they reject the new covenant. That's right. If you read Jeremiah 30 and 31, you will see that the new covenant is all about bringing all Israel back into the Holy Land, and you are not going to be able to bring all Israel back within the 67 borders. Therefore, what the EU is saying, they reject the new covenant. So they have forfeited themselves of salvation and the new covenant, and are now going to subject themselves to the wrath of the Almighty Jehovah when the plagues are poured out. That is the position of the EU. Let's go and find out what the position of Russia is, shall we? Russia has also expressed concerns that the American peace plan would not succeed unless it implemented a two-state solution, the TASS news agency reported Tuesday. Russia has yet to see the peace plan, and its permanent representative to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, told TASS that Moscow doubts it can be viable. We hear about it for the second year already. They regularly promise this, but these are jam tomorrow promises. We have not seen it so far, and nobody knows when we will see it, Nebenzia told TASS. He added that no plan will be viable if the international community recognized basis for the Middle East settlement is not taken into account, and it is crucial to rely on a two-state solution. So essentially, what they're saying is, well, we haven't seen it yet, but if Israel doesn't share Jerusalem with its enemy, they won't ascribe to it either, thereby themselves also rejecting the new covenant as written in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, and all the parameters of the new covenant, which is bringing all Israel back from every nation, kindred, and tongue back to the Holy Land. And this two-state solution makes sure that Israel will never have the old city, will never have the city of David, and will never have the kingdom of David. Thereby rejecting the new covenant and subjecting themselves now to the wrath of the Almighty Jehovah, our Father in heaven, and all the plagues listed in the book of Revelation. The statements come shortly before comments from Trump's UN ambassador Nikki Haley gave a hint, but no details of her boss's peace plan for Israel and the Fakestinians. The plan is long, she said, takes advantage of new technology, has a lot both sides will like and things they won't like. Well, if it has things in it that Jehovah, the Elohim of Israel, doesn't like, then it will be soundly rejected. And of course, Nikki Haley has already pointed out that that is the fact. That it has things in it that Jehovah, our Father in heaven, the Holy One of Israel, will not like it. That's what she said, essentially. Haley said Israelis and Palestinians, as well as countries around the world, have a choice. What, live with your enemy? That's not what all the other countries in the world have done. That's not what they've done. They fought against their enemy. Focus on the parts that they dislike, which she said means returning to the failed status quo of the 50 years, or focus on parts they like and encourage peace negotiations to move forward. The U.S. ambassador said she has read the plan, told the UN Security Council that both sides would benefit greatly from a peace agreement, but the Fakestinians would benefit more and the Israelis would risk more. What she's really saying is, folks, let's stop the double talk, shall we? Let's stop the double talk and let's say it like it is. The Fakestinians would benefit more and the Israelis would benefit less. That's why I call, based upon what Nikki Haley said she read the plan, and she said that the Fakestinians would benefit more and the Israelis would benefit less. Therefore, I call it the scam of the century, because that's exactly what it is. He wants to call it peace plan of the century. I'm dubbing it the scam of the century. Haley, who is stepping down at the end of the month, said moving forward to negotiations of peace will need leaders with real vision to do it. She declared, the world will be watching. I guess it doesn't matter if our Father in heaven is watching or not, is it? Isn't that right, Nikki Haley, huh? Is that what you mean by that statement? The world is watching? As if somehow or another, the world is the judge? Seriously? Haley made no mention of any of these issues in her last speech at the Council's monthly Mideast meeting, stressing instead that the unshakable bond between the United States and Israel, which she had reflected in her nearly 2 years as ambassador. Unshakable, huh? Unbelievable. And she says, given my record, some might mistakenly conclude that I am unsympathetic to the Fakestinian people. She said, nothing could be further from the truth. Well, I will say this, Nikki Haley. You are sympathetic to the terrorists. Is that what you're saying? Because that's what they are. They are what they do. And they do after every week after their so-called Friday prayers. That's what they do. And you're sympathetic to them. Okay. At least we know where you stand, Nikki Haley. Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon said late last month that U.S. officials have told Israel's government They expect to release a long-awaited Israeli-Palestinian peace plan in the beginning of 2019. U.S. President Donald Trump calls the plan drafted by a team headed by his son-in-law Jared Kushner and advisor Jason Greenblatt the deal of the century. Well, as I've mentioned yesterday, I said David Friedman. I guess I meant to say Jason Greenblatt. That U.S. President Donald Trump, by having these two Jews create this or draft this scam of the century, he is heaping even more condemnation upon himself because he's causing condemnation to come upon these two Jews. Nikolai Maidanov, the UN Mideast envoy, told the council he remains concerned by the weakening of international consensus and the absence of collective efforts to achieve an end to Israeli occupation. The occupiers are Arabs, not Israelis. That's who the occupiers are. They're not only the Arabs, they're also the Europeans and the Russians. But since when did telling the truth matter to Christians? At the end of 2018, we are nowhere close to reviving efforts for a negotiated solution, he said. Without a political horizon, all our collective and individual efforts merely contribute to managing the conflict rather than resolving it. You can't manage it. There's only one who can resolve it, and you can't. And he will resolve it, and you won't. Maidanov also reported to the council on Israel's compliance with a December 16 resolution that condemned Israeli settlers in the land of Palestinians, fake Stinians, want to include in their future state and said the settlement have no legal validity. The resolution demanded to halt such activity for the sake of salvaging the two-state solution. Over and over and over again, treading your manure-coated shoes on top of the new covenant for Israel is what the Gentiles are doing. The UN Mideast coordinator said Israel has taken no steps to comply with the resolution and has continued expanding settlements and constructing new ones, as they should. Because that land does not belong to the Arabs, and it does not belong to the Europeans. That land belongs to our Father in heaven. And who made Europe the almighty judge? Who made Russia the almighty judge? No one. Over the past year, he said that although Gaza has been the most volatile, the risk of an explosion in the West Bank has also grown. You mean in Judea and Samaria? Since when did the truth matter to you Russians? Israeli security measures followed these incidents to search operations in Judea and Samaria, city of Ramallah, as well as clashes and protests that turned violent are added to already tense atmospheres, he said. Let's go back to Zechariah 14 again. It's 14. And let's see. Or is it 12? No, it's not 12. I went to it yesterday. All right, I'll find it here in just a minute. It is 12. All right. Went over this the other day. Verse 1, the burden of the word of Jehovah for Israel's sake, saith Jehovah, who stretched forth the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Yes, man, you think you are the judge? Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And as the young man pointed out, and when he asked, is this the siege of Jerusalem in the last days? And it was a rhetorical question, because a rhetorical question illustrates the truth. Apparently so. And in that day, I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. That's right, all people. No exception, folks. All that burden himself with it shall be smashed to pieces. As we read in Daniel 2, verses 40 all the way to the end of the chapter. Though all the people, not some of them, all the people of the earth will be gathered together against it. In that day, says Jehovah, I will smite every bird of prey. It's not a horse here. That in the last days, they won't be riding on horses. You can go look it up. I've showed you the translation over and over again. This means bird, like a swift bird, with astonishment, and his rider with madness. And I will open my eyes upon a house of Judah. That's who's there right now, the house of Judah. And will smite every horse of the people with blindness. Yes, all their fighter planes are going to, not horses, their birds are going to come falling down out of the sky. They will not be able to use their navigation equipment. I better go to, just in case somebody is new here on this channel, Strong's Concordance. Every horse, 5483, sus in Hebrew, a swallow, a swift type of bird. And this was the original meaning. And in later times, horses. Okay? So, smite every one of these birds of the people, of the Gentiles, with blindness. In other words, their navigational equipment is going to fail. And they're going to come crashing to the ground. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, and Jehovah of hosts, their Elohim. And in that day I will make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood. So the Gentiles, the nations that are going to come against it, are going to be like wood. And the governors of Judah, that they call themselves Israel today, are going to be like a torch. That is how overwhelming the battle is going to be in Israel's favor. like a torch of fire in a sheaf, and they shall devour all the folk round about on the right hand and on the left. Whose ships are in the Mediterranean Sea right now against Israel? The Russians. Who lives in the Mediterranean Sea? Europe. Who is on the other side? Iran, Iraq, Syria. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place. That's right, East Jerusalem. So to all you world leaders out there, you can't say the truth. Donald Trump can't say the truth. Nikki Haley can't say the truth. None of them can say the truth. Jerusalem is going to be once again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. Yes, East Jerusalem is Israel's capital. Why? Because that's where the holy place is. That's where Mount Zion is. And yet, these Christians who claim to be people of the new covenant, they reject the holy place. They reject East Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And by doing so, they also reject the Son of David, who's going to be sitting on the throne of David, instituting the new covenant in East Jerusalem. Liars are they all. Every one of them. Even in Jerusalem, Jehovah shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. This is the reason why we read in Zechariah 14, verse 1, behold, the day of Jehovah comes, and your spoil shall be divided in the midst of you, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken. Yes, he's going to save the people outside the city first, so that those inside the city do not magnify themselves above those who are outside the city. And the houses rifled and the women ravished, and half of the city. Which half of that are they going to force everybody out of, all the Jews out of? East Jerusalem, the real Jerusalem. Into exile, not captivity, exile. And the rest of the people that's in West Jerusalem will not be cut off from the city. Then shall Jehovah go forth and fight against those nations. Fight against the Goyim as he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east side. How many times has this mentioned East Jerusalem? And yet, not a single one of these Christian leaders can confess that East Jerusalem is Israel's capital. Can you? Can you confess that East Jerusalem is Israel's eternal capital? If you can't, then you are not a partaker of the new covenant. Because you see, East Jerusalem and its king is going to be the mediator, the one who institutes the new covenant. The new covenant will be instituted and mediated out of East Jerusalem and the king that's in East Jerusalem. Yes. And those who reject it, reject the new covenant, and are asking the plagues written in the book of Revelation to be heaped upon yourself. That's what you're doing. It was so simple for me, a backwoods country boy, to figure out How is it that these highly educated people with umpteenth degrees, IQ in the 160s, and they cannot figure out that the new covenant is going to be instituted and mediated from East Jerusalem, from the most holy place? They should know better. It is arrogance. It is arrogance that keeps their eyes closed so that they cannot understand. Lack of humility, being rich and increased with goods and having need of nothing. That's what causes it, folks. And so, after the incident, after Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, let's see. I wonder if I can find it again now. And Hurricane Katrina. Well, I won't be able to find it now unless I go to one of my own videos. Let's see, Bush peace plan and Hurricane Katrina. Let's try that. This is on the Jewish press. That's interesting. Even the Jews saw it. Oh. Let's read this, folks. This is all the same fella. See, he wrote about this in 2015, and he's writing about it again in 2017. Hurricane Katrina, Harvey, and the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. No sooner than the Trump trio of White House senior advisor Jared Kushner, Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt, and Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategy Dina Habib Powell, born in Egypt and living in Texas, came to the Middle East, meeting with Israeli and Palestinian officials, and then shuttling to meetings with the leaders of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Jordan to try and restart the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Hurricane Harvey began to hit Texas with its Jehovah-given power of destruction. Now, exactly 12 years later, Louisiana is being hit again too. In fact, the Elohim of Israel has been doing this since the beginning of the peace process. In March 1991, President George H.W. Bush pushed Israel into attending the Madrid Peace Conference. Later that year, Hurricane Perfect Storm attacked the east coast of the United States. Bush, staying at his vacation home in Kennebunkport, Maine at the time, had to evacuate. His house was damaged. In my September 2005 article, Israel to America, I Warned You, I wrote, well, it's begun. Less than a week after the Israeli army expelled thousands of Jews from their homes in Gaza and northern Samaria, uprooting 25 communities, American troops were evacuating people from their homes in Louisiana and Mississippi, the greatest natural disaster that has ever happened in American history. The hand of Jehovah is written all over this one. You see, folks? But they're too arrogant. They're too arrogant to listen. They're too arrogant to see. They're too high-minded. Many in Israel and America, Jews and non-Jews, have seen Jehovah's hand in the hurricane disaster Katrina. In 2005, Jerusalem Kabbalist Rabbi David Batsri said about the Katrina that divine retribution is meted out according to the principles of measure for measure. Just as the Jews were forced out of their homes as a result of U.S. pressure on Israel, so too are Americans be forced out of their homes. Obadiah Yosef said, the former Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel. He, Bush, brought about the expulsion from Gaza. Now he has his own expulsion. Whenever this country encourages Israel to give up part of their rightful Jehovah-given land, we have suffered the consequences, wrote a discussion board participant on the website of the Christian Broadcasting Network. John Green, senior fellow at the Washington think tank Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, said, about half of Americans believe that a divine power sends judgment through hurricanes, floods, and natural disaster. The basic idea that Jehovah is in charge and he expects people to behave and he isn't happy when they don't, that's a very common idea, Green explained. At the time, even Illinois liberal Democrat Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. said at the news conference, Jehovah is responsible for this and in his own time he will reveal why. Well, Jesse, we already know why. Well, see, Jesse Jackson is one of those who is haughty and blinded by his ill-gotten gain. And that's the reason why he didn't know why. I will continue. I explained in my earlier June 2005 article, Israel, tell America the cold, hard truth. Warning there, America, your country is in danger. The Elohim of Israel, who has brought his people, the Jews, home after 2,000 years, is watching your every move. Stop pushing Israel into suicidal concessions before it's too late and your fate is sealed. Did anybody listen to this man? No. Is anybody listening to me? Well, when I say, did anybody listen to this man? Obviously, I did. Obviously, others did. The people who it was pointed at, the people who it was necessary for to listen, they are the ones who did not listen, and they won't listen now. And I quote, I said then, the redemption of the Jewish people and the return to the Holy Land, Israel, is an unstoppable divine process. The Palestinians won't stop it, the Europeans won't stop it, and America won't stop it. If America continues to promote the rights of the Palestinian, and I will say terrorists, what the Bible calls a non-people, Deuteronomy 32, verse 21, know that you are going to be against the Elohim of history and Jewish destiny. Beware. Just like when George Bush and Condi Rice worked to promote the expulsion of about 10,000 Gaza and Samaritan Jews from their homes, destroying whole communities in the process in 2005 to curry Arab favor, that time to gain support for America's war efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yes, that's what it was all about, folks. The Trump administration is continuing to work to sacrifice Israel on the altar of Middle East peace to gain support of a Sunni coalition of states against Shiite Iran. And there you have the reason behind Donald Trump's chicanery. He is a weakling. He's not the man that he claims he is. You can go look on the Drudge Report today and you will see he's backed down on everything. He backed down on the gun control thing. He's backed down on the border wall. Look at it. It's on the Drudge Report this morning. You see what the date is, 12/19/2018. Go look at it. He's not the man he claims he is. A U.S. official cited in the Washington Post article by David Ignatius recently explained that the Trump administration is exploring new approaches for easing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that builds on talks with the budding Sunni Arab coalition of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt and Jordan. Yes, all of these are Israel's enemies. They have started a war with Israel before. And so he wants to get them to take care of the Iranian problem. And so he wants Israel to risk more, as Nikki Haley would say, and the Fakestinians to gain more, as exactly what she said. That's the reason why I can safely and truthfully tell you today that Donald Trump's peace plan, as he calls of the century, is in fact the scam of the century. The new American strategy seems to be unite the Palestinian Authority and Hamas under the Abbas leadership so that a united Palestinian bloc could renew negotiations with Israel. The Trump administration is trying to use its connections with the Sunni Arab states to exert pressure on all the Palestinian factions to join up. The Americans in return have pledged to bring Israel to the negotiating table when the Palestinians are ready. And to grease the squeaky wheel, the U.S. is trying to bring Jerusalem and Ramallah together through joint economic initiatives. Meanwhile, the Arab coalition has tried to move Hamas closer to Egypt and the UAE and distance them from Qatar, which has for years been a major financial backer. Mohammed Dalan, a Gazan now living in the UAE, has been the key intermediary. For years, floated as a potential successor to Abbas, he continued to Gaza and organized a United Arab Emirates finance humanitarian aid there. The Dalan's aid to Gaza is said to have included about $15 million a month in food and social assistance for families, plus additional money for electric and water. The plan is to provide economic and social support through Egypt with Israel's blessing that can weaken the Muslim Brotherhood's influence. Israel has allowed fuel and other shipments to pass through from Egypt through the border crossing at Rafah, signaling its tacit support. Dalan and the United Arab Emirates have larger plans. Dalan said the UAE has pledged to finance $100 million electrical plant to be built on the Egyptian side of the border to help power Gaza. Although Dalan is a longtime rival of Abbas, U.S. officials insist they don't want to undermine the PA leader. Let's see. True, the Israeli government carried out the first internationally sanctioned ethnic cleansing in the 21st century, expelling Jews from Gush Katif and from northern Samaria in 2005. But did America have to encourage it? True, Netanyahu is going along with America's latest plan, but Trump administration is actively pushing the peace process. Who cares what Sharon wanted or Bush wanted or the EU or the UN wanted in 2005? Who cares what Netanyahu thinks he needs to do to preserve his premiership, or the Trump administration needs to do to build his Arab coalition today? What one has some sense in his head must consider is this: what does the Elohim of Israel want? Yes. Because what man wants doesn't matter. You see, the new covenant is about fulfilling the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob before they're raised from the dead. But you see, all the nations of this world, including the United States, are working hard to try to stop it. I will continue. And that over the last 100 years it has been abundantly clear The Elohim of Israel has been manipulating history to bring about what he promised thousands of years ago to our forefathers. As recorded in Bible prophecies, Jews are returning to the promised land from the four corners of the earth. They are being redeemed. So I ask the question now, what's really going on here? Well, you guys, anybody who's been following my YouTube channel, you know what I've been saying. They're standing in the way of redemption. They're blocking the door to the kingdom. They're trying to make sure it doesn't happen. And by doing so, forfeiting salvation, forfeiting any chance at partaking of the new covenant. That's what they're doing. America's support for the expulsion plan of the Jews from Gush Katif in Gaza ran counter to Jehovah's plan, and it is clear that his payback time came swift and furious as Hurricane Katrina uprooted whole communities along America's Gulf Coast. So too now, America's new attempts to promote peace with the threat of throwing Jews out of their homes from Judea and Samaria have brought the catastrophe that is Hurricane Harvey to Texas and Louisiana. Just as the Jews were made refugees from Gush Katif, so were the Americans. Just as the Jews lost homes and property, so did Americans. And now with Hurricane Harvey. Now this was back in 2017, folks. As I warned Americans in 2005, America is on the fast track to hell. I couldn't say it any clearer. Unless you change your government's policies toward Israel and this so-called peace process, just as the Soviet Union fell by not letting the Jews leave for Israel, so too will America. I agree wholeheartedly. I have said many times before, by the time all the Jews and all Israel are removed from the United States of America, the United States of America will be a skeleton of its former self. Now we'll continue with this man. And all this is happening at a time when America is ripping itself apart, fighting in the streets between extreme left and extreme right, which they are both the same, quite frankly, is slowly moving America towards closer to a civil war. And then there's North Korea destabilizing East Asia and threatening to nuke the U.S. Wake up, America, before it's too late. Stop kowtowing to your enemy, fanatic Islam, whether of the Wahhabi, Sunni, or Shiite version. It makes no difference, and he's right. The Sunni nations are not friends of Israel, and they never will be until they are beaten down. Stop pushing your ally, Israel, into trying to commit suicide. You will just be the loser for it. Well, I'm going to add something to what he said. If you, the United States, or any other country around the world, try to force Israel to commit suicide, you as a nation will commit suicide. That's right. That's what's going to happen. And it will be brother against brother, as written in the scripture. He says, I don't know Jehovah's timetable if China will replace the U.S. and become the next world superpower, or the Messiah will come first and destroy the Palestinian Authority. But what I can tell you is that the Elohim of Israel will wreak havoc on any country that opposes his purposes in history. The final redemption of the Jewish people have begun. America, join up or beware the consequences. I completely agree. I could not have said it better myself. Ariel Nathan Pasco, you are somebody I look up to, because you tell the truth, unadulterated, and full steam ahead. That takes courage, and truth will always destroy the lie. So, Hopefully, this has been beneficial to those who have been following my YouTube channel. This is what I believe in. This is what this YouTube channel is all about. It is about the redemption of all Israel from the north, south, east, and west, from the greatest to the least. And see, for me personally, it's not about whether you are 75% Jewish or 50% Ephraim or 25% Dan. No, all of them, all of them, all of them, from the greatest to the least, must return. And I tell you, folks, even of the living, the current population on this earth right now, there are hundreds of millions of people that fit into that category. All Israel must be returned. And for all Israel to be returned, that means all the land that is written about in Yehoshua 1 verses 1 through 4 must be given back to Israel, or it will be taken from them by force. There's an easy way and there's a hard way. You should always choose the easy way, the way of life.